Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning if you are joining us from the other side of the Atlantic. And welcome to this Iceberg Data Lab webinar. Today we're going to talk about the new developments in our flagship indicator, the Corporate Biodiversity Footprint. So thank you all for joining. I'm with Clément today. Hi, Clément.
Hello, Thomas.
Clément is our lead biodiversity modeler. He's been working at Iceberg for a few years, and he and his team have been working on the methodology on our model to bring the new enhancement this year. So we have integrated two new pressures into the CBF, which are water stress, water consumption, and invasive alien species. So we'll tell you a bit more in a minute, but we're very proud of those developments that makes our model even more precise to measure the impact of corporates on biodiversity. So to start, let me tell you a few words about Iceberg, maybe for the people who don't know us very well. We're a European ESG data provider specialized on the environment. We have 5 years of existence, 5 years of expertise in biodiversity and climate assessment. So what do? We provide environmental impact, climate or biodiversity impact of corporates, listed corporates for most of our universe, but we do as well private equity, and we measure the impact on the environment through our model. Our model has a robust scientific backing. It's one of our key differentiators. We pride ourselves to be based really on science, with the concept of physical flows, that Clément will tell you about at the heart of our model. And we analyze the whole value chain of companies. That's how we get the scope 3 upstream and downstream for all companies in our indicators in climate and biodiversity. We have a very granular level of analysis. We include more than 2,300 goods and services in our model. We are using NAS nomenclature, sectoral nomenclature, but we have developed the NAS 5 level. So we make a difference between a company that produces chicken soup or vegetable soup. That's how granular we go. We are a small company. We're very close to our clients, and of course we respond to any inquiry in less than 48 hours, and even Clément here, the lead modelers, make calls with our clients. We have a coverage now that close to 9,000 companies, so very happy that our coverage keeps increasing. And you can see at the top right-hand side corner, we're very proud we've been awarded the ESG Data Provider of the Year 2025 by the English media Environmental Finance, by a jury of 40 independent portfolio managers. So very happy about that, and I will tell you just a word about the products that we offer. So on the one hand, climate indicators, we can provide you carbon footprints, avoided emissions. SB2A is science-based 2-degree alignment, so the alignment of the companies with the Paris Agreement. We do 2 degrees and 1.5. And finally, the transition and physical risk scores. On the biodiversity side, our flagship indicator that we will talk about today is the Corporate Biodiversity Footprint, the CBF. But we provide as well positive contribution to biodiversity. As well, the dependency score and dependency at risk. So it's basically the revenue of a company that depends or that is at risk, that depends on the ecosystem. The CBF score, so this time it's the biodiversity score of one company versus the sector. So it's basically the best in class for each sector. Finally, a sensitive area indicators and deforestation in square kilometers. Our clients use us for the use case, the regulatory use case you see at the top of the screen, which is basically regulatory reports, EU taxonomy, TNFD, Article 29 in France, or SFDR reports. And at the bottom of the screen, you see the other use case. Some clients use us to make selection, exclusion lists, screening, other for portfolio monitoring, risk monitoring, environmental risk monitoring. Our data is really useful to do engagement as well, because you can go to a company, you can go to a specific pressure in a specific scope. So it's very convenient to engage and do stewardship. And finally, our data is used to build ETFs and indices linked to biodiversity. So after this short introduction, Clément, what have we done? And oh, sorry, I forgot our credentials. We're very happy to have plenty of clients in France, but in Europe as well, and now starting in the US. We have a lot of universities as well that are working with us, a lot of research teams over the world for academic research purposes are using our data, and we've seen a lot coming in this year. So I assume there will be a lot of research papers published about biodiversity impact in the field of sustainable finance research this year. We're very happy about that. But so now let's talk about the new things in our model and those new pressures that we have added, invasive alien species and water stress, water consumption.
Thank you, Thomas. So indeed, we'll go through the new updates within the CBF 3.0. Before addressing those changes, I just wanted to do a quick recap of what the CBF can offer. So it provides a biodiversity footprint expressed in square kilometer MSA. This impact covers impacts across the value chain, as Thomas mentioned, and also it addresses impacts coming from all main drivers of biodiversity loss, with, of course, varying degrees of coverage depending on the main driver. We provide the footprints in absolute terms, but also in financial intensities, with three different financial KPIs to correct the size bias that may come with the absolute footprints. For each data point delivered, there is a data quality level data point associated to it, which is meant to reflect the quality of the primary data used to compute the data point. And all the elements that I've mentioned are supposed to also reflect the level of granularity and breakdown that you're able to get with the CBF of one single company. You're able to have the aggregated figure, but also disaggregation by scope, main driver, and so on and so on. One thing that I wanted to mention also before going on to the update additions is where does the MSA stand amongst other potential biodiversity metrics and variables. This table is representing the essential biodiversity variables framework that classifies variables into first broadly two types, species focused and ecosystem focused. At the bottom of the table, you can see examples corresponding to the different subcategories. For instance, one most of us may be familiar with is the IUCN Red List Index. You can see the species population. And I think it's important and interesting to keep in mind where does the MSA stand. It is considered an ecosystem-focused metric within the community composition category, meaning that, broadly speaking, it looks at the collective diversity of organisms within ecosystems. And I think it's crucial to keep in mind to understand the scope of what the CBF does.
And MSA is the most used approach on the market by all biodiversity data provider.
Now on to the practical changes coming up with the 3.0 release. The first practical change is the revamping of the architecture, meaning that the first level of disaggregation that you get from the aggregated CBF of a company is the breakdown by main impact driver. So land use, pollution, climate change, resource use, and invasive alien species. This allows for the way the CBF is structured to be compatible and let's say better connected with frameworks such as the TNFD or approaches by the IPBES. Overall, I think it allows for improved smoothness between reporting frameworks, evolving literature, and so on and so on. That makes the CBF even more adapted to the ecosystem of tools and reporting framework that are used today. The architecture was also revamped on the lower levels of aggregation. So for each main impact driver, from main driver impact, you will also get a disaggregation of the sub-impacts corresponding to it. We have reviewed also the terminology to make sure that the names of the impacts are as clear and transparent as possible. And one example to illustrate this would be acidification, which is disaggregated into terrestrial acidification and freshwater acidification to really provide and be clear on the realm that is affected by the impact. And so at one's wishes, it's possible to re-aggregate the lower categories by realm, for instance. That's a possibility. About the new added impacts and pressures, so we have freshwater acidification, eutrophication, here, and most importantly, impacts coming from freshwater consumption and invasive alien species that are divided into impacts from entry and proliferation. We'll have a few slides dedicated specifically to invasive alien species to better introduce the approach for the impact assessment.
By the way, you guys can ask questions, and we'll have 5 minutes at the end to answer to your questions. So at the bottom right-hand side corner, feel free to ask questions. And now let's have a look at our model. How does it work?
So it works in the same way that I used before. The hasn't changed. We start with revenue data that is disaggregated by sector. We use the NACE classification to assess companies. This data by segment, by sector, is then used to compute and model quantities of commodities that are produced and consumed for each sector. So this is made possible by an input-output model that we've refined with external databases. And then we also have a internal database of life cycle analysis factors that we document with external databases. Then we have the pressures for each commodities in each sectors, and we get the impacts at company level. We can model the impact from revenues, but we also have a team of analysts that go through annual reports and are able to collect and input unstructured reported data that is company specific to help us refine the analysis. And so if the data is relevant and quantifiable in a way, it can be input. And so the data type can be specific revenue, a better description of a sector's actual activity, can be quantities or location of goods and services produced or consumed, or even reported GHGs or air pollutant emission. This table is a bit similar to one that we saw 2 slides ago, but it's maybe the closest representation to the data structure that is available to end users. So you have the CBF impact of the company, and then the first breakdown available is by main impact driver: land use, climate change, pollution, resource use, and invasive alien species. And then for each of these impact drivers, you get another breakdown with the constituting sub-impacts. So the addition in this slide is the corresponding pressures to each sub-impacts. So just to be very clear, the CBF as a product doesn't provide the pressures. You will have to go look for another product. The TNFD product is one where we provide the pressures, but this is just to illustrate and show you the granularity and types of flows and emissions that we're able to capture to assess certain impacts. So one example to illustrate would be acidification, where you can see the different types of air pollutants that we look at to assess this impact category. And another one would be for land occupation. We have actually 10 different categories of land use or land covers that we use to build the land occupation assessment.
I think that gives a good image of how deep we go into the analysis just for land use, so more than 10 different land use. Okay.
Now on to commenting the changes brought by the updates and the additions of new impact categories. So first of all, commenting on freshwater consumption, which is here represented in the resource use impact category. They are equivalent since resource use is, as for now, only constituted of the freshwater consumption impact. And just as a disclaimer before we start, the pressure factors for freshwater consumption are only available for commodities in the food, transport, automotive, and metals and mining and chemical sectors. The addition for other sectors will be done by S1 2026. But so that's the reason why the I think it's blue, the light blue segment here is most significant only in those sectors. And we might have a bit of impact coming from resource use in other sectors because commodities from these sectors here, contaminate is a big word, but let's say spread naturally into other sectors as well. So back onto actually commenting the results for those sectors. We have the sector where it is the most significant is the food sector, where it is the second impact driver. Even if it is the second impact driver, it's I would say much less significant than the first impact driver, because land use is built in a way that food is made in a way that land use is the most predominant impact. And we have sectors like chemicals, where it's also around the same percentages. But in a way, the signal that it gives is that it can be significant, but it is, in terms of rankings, it doesn't compete with, let's say, climate change or land use as much. Now on to the addition of invasive alien species. So the review the methodological review carried out looked at all sectors, but the results of this review and this development only targeted food, retail, transportation, automotive, and metals and mining, because the materiality of the impacts of invasive alien species in other sectors was deemed not relevant enough. We have the most significant impact in the transportation sector here. So it's the fourth impact driver, but since the impact is distributed more evenly, it represents around 17% of the total impact. So here you have represented the average of all companies belonging to the transportation sector. But so this means that for companies that are very exposed, such as shipping companies, this contribution from invasive alien species is actually quite high. For the same reasons in terms of the methodology, we have an impact in the automotive sector, and we also have a small impact in the construction sector, and this is due to companies that construct in transport infrastructures, such as airports and ports, that fall into the construction sector. I won't go too much into detail about the methodology, really, of how we assess invasive alien species impacts. I will just, let's say, talk about this introductory slide. We don't know of any provider that provides data related to invasive alien species footprints. And so the release of this new data by us is really, I think, meant to provoke an introduction in a way. And so this here it really is an introduction to the topic. So the way to approach the impact of invasive alien species for corporates is to look at biological invasions that are broken down into 4 stages: transport, introduction, establishment, and spread. And then because the signals tend to be correlated between transport and introduction on the one hand and establishment and spread on the second hand, we decided to aggregate them both in the assessment approach for us to provide as few uncorrelated data points as possible, because we don't want to overflow clients with data points that are in the end correlated. It wouldn't make much sense. So that really is the conceptual approach that one needs to get into to understand what is happening with corporates and invasive alien species. Then the topic of value chain boundaries is complicated but important. Scopes was a concept that was developed for GHG accounting, but it doesn't translate well for things that are not flows. And so here, since invasive alien species are not flows of emissions, it's more about economic activities that facilitate their transport or establishment. The concept of scope doesn't work that well. And then on to negative impact. We really here look at the statistical contribution to an impact, because the impact allocated to a shipping company is statistical, but it does not mean that necessarily this shipping company has introduced one or several invasive alien species. And then there's the difference between negative impact coming from other impact categories, such as land use, where, for instance, building a parking lot results in complete artificialization of an area, where for invasive alien species, we might have an area that is where native biodiversity has been completely replaced, but the final state isn't one that is artificialized. It's just might have living organisms in it, but they're just not native species. And just, yeah, in a nutshell, how we did the impact assessment, we used 2 reports by the IPBES, the one from 2019, where we extracted the relative contribution of impact drivers, and so it helped us understand and assess what is the global impact of invasive alien species relative to other global impacts, so namely climate change, land use, and so on, that we're able to quantify. So on the one hand, this report, and on the other hand, the 2023 IIS special report, where that dives more into the responsibility and kind of relative materiality of different economic activities to the overall impact of invasive alien species. And so by combining things that we extracted from these 2 reports, and also doing, obviously, our own in-house research to complement those information, we were able to build impact factors that express the loss of square kilometer MSA per, let's say, passenger kilometer, ton kilometer, tons of food products grown, and so on and so on. I'll be very brief for financial intensities. We have 3 different financial intensities. We've replaced EV by EVIC, which is a great step forward because it aligns with what PCAF and PBAF recommend. And we also replaced capital employed by total asset minus cash because it creates less volatility for the financial intensities. Here is an example of what one can plot with the data we provide. Here it's the average financial intensity per sector, with sectors with the highest footprint to a capital investment ratio that are at the beginning of the ranking.
Thank you, Clément. That was brief but very clear. I think people understand the effort you guys put in developing the model, at innovating and including those new pressures, and how much more precise our model is for those sectors that have been affected: food, chemicals, transport. So yeah, that's the goal, and then we have even more enhancement to come later on this year about the model. A lot about asset location. It might be the next webinar in October. Time for questions. We have a first one. Clément, do we take, it's a question that comes regularly, do we take into account impacts on marine ecosystems?
So far, we don't account for impacts on marine ecosystems because we don't have enough, I would say, like sources, scientific literature where there is a built consensus on impact assessment for marine impacts. So this is obviously in the pipeline, maybe coming up in the future, near future, hopefully.
And I had a question on the side. Do we deliver sub-impact as well as the aggregated impact?
Yes, of course.
In terms of CBF?
Of course, we want all types of users, from beginners to experts, to be able to use the data. So you'd have the aggregated total footprint, then you'd have the footprint by main impact driver, and also by sub-impact. So you're able to do your custom analysis however you want to do it. Yes.
So for one indicator, we'll have actually.
Yeah, I mean the amount of here you'd have at least like, so you'd have this granularity, not the pressure one. You have all the colored boxes, and that'd be broken down by scope. So you'd have scope 1, 2, 3 upstream, 3 downstream for all boxes here.
All of them. Yeah, that's why we say our data is granular. We have a question here. How does the data quality for invasive species impact relate to the data quality of impact by other pressures?
It's on different levels, honestly, because let's say that where we derive the how can I say, for other pressures, we might have data coming from that might be reported in a way. So we might have GHG reported and stuff like that. So obviously this cannot be done with invasive alien species. Invasive alien species impacts are modeled from the quantities of commodities, so passenger kilometer, ton kilometer, and so on. We might have companies, and we do have companies, that report the amount of passenger kilometer that they provide as a service. Then where it changes from other impact drivers is the damage function. The damage functions for other impact drivers are come from literature reviews, scientific papers, which are meant to provide these damage functions. The damage function that we developed on our own for invasive alien species is an assessment is meant to provide a signal rather than no signal. So in a way, depending on your level of confidence and whether or not you deem that because it's not as accurate as the rest, it should be taken out of the footprint, you can remove it. But our stance is that a signal is better than no signal. And obviously we have the results are sent to us, went through a quality check, was presented to a scientific committee, and so on and so on and so on. We were advised or supported at least in our dynamic to include it in the footprint. So that's my answer.
Yep. Thank you, Clément. We have a very last question on the buzzer from Pablo. Is the methodology publicly available to use? Is there a methodology report available explaining how the impact factors are calculated?
The methodological guide is available on our website. Of course, we cannot disclose the entirety of our IP, but the main elements, I invite you to go through the client guide. And of course, when you're a client, you have access to more details than when you're not a client. So we are as transparent as we can be with our partners.
Correct. So on the website, you can go to documentation and you will find a methodological guide for the CBF. But indeed, our clients get an extra level of insight into our model. That's the cause where Clément and the other analysts take part too, and other modelers here with our existing clients. If you're not a client, you can download the guide on the website, but you can as well request a demo and we can have a conversation. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Clément. We'll be in touch and we'll come next month for a new webinar. Have a good day, everybody. Merci, Clément.
Bye.